That's enough of a change to create a pressure change in the text. All right, and then we'll summarize. It wants us to list the settings for volume ventilation. So I'll turn off the lights and we'll write it on the board. So we took I have to keep you awake. So over the last 2 weeks, we went through all the settings for the ventilator. Now we want to summarize it. So for volume ventilation. What do we set? It can be out of order.
Flow rate.
A flow rate? Okay.
Eye time.
All right. Eye time.
Respiratory rate?
Duration.
Respiratory rate. Okay. That's a result of ventilation. It's not something we set.
Oh, the PEEP.
PEEP.
And I think tidal volume as well.
Okay. Tidal volume. FiO2.
Look at you.
I think we got it.
Sensitivity.
So, tidal volume, respiratory rate, and then of course we have to tell the ventilator how fast to push the volume in. FiO2 and PEEP.
Do we do the
Just
sensitivity?
Okay.
There's a few things we gotta do.
The PIP will be a result of pushing the volume in. Next week we'll talk about pressure ventilation, and you have to set the pressure for inspiration. With volume ventilation, you don't set the pressure, it's just a result of whatever it takes to push the air in. So I'll just put inspiratory pressure will vary.
Oh, do some tidal volume.
Yes, when we push the air in,
Right.
or deliver a tidal volume, more appropriately said.
And you can change the tidal volume by changing the PIP, right?
In pressure ventilation, yes.
Okay.
But this is volume ventilation.
Mhm.
All right, so of all of those settings, which settings control oxygenation?
FiO2 and PEEP.
And PEEP.
Okay, and then what two settings control ventilation?
Respiratory rate and inspiratory.
Say flow rate.
Tidal volume and respiratory rate. Does everybody agree?
Yeah.
Yes. So when you get a blood gas bag and then the CO2 is not in the range that you want it to be in, then you would adjust your tidal volume or respiratory rate. If you get a blood gas and your oxygenation is not where you want it to be, that's when you would change your FiO2. right, so here's the blood gas, and you need to make changes to get the blood gas into normal range. So what do you think of the pH? Is that in range?
Yes.
Okay, and what about CO2?
Yes.
Yeah, so 35 to 45 is in range, and even though it's one away from not being in range, we're going to use black and white when deciding on what to do. So it's in range. PaO2 is 60 with a 90 sat.
Low.
That's low.
So oxygenation is the problem?
So you
Okay,
change
so oxygenation is the problem. So what could you change to improve oxygenation?
P.
All right. Would you ever say the respiratory rate?
No. That's for ventilation.
Don't get it wrong on the test, okay?
Say no more.
Oh, it'll be there.
Dang,
Now-
it's sexy.
But could you
When you're
fix
off of a
myself?
ventilator and just, let's say you're post-op and you're heavily sedated after your surgery, and there's just a pulse oximeter on your finger, and that's the only way to tell if your breathing is going to slow down and stop, is if your oxygenation falls. So it is true that when your minute ventilation goes low enough, it does affect oxygenation. So that's why you'll see patients after surgery, the only thing that's monitoring them is a pulse oximeter. And if the O2 saturation falls, it's like, wake up, come on, take some breaths. So that's different than a patient on a ventilator. On a ventilator, we're always providing minimum ventilation. So it'll never be that the ventilation goes so low that it affects oxygenation. So as long as you stick to these two, tidal volume and respiratory rate affect ventilation, FiO2 and PEEP affect oxygenation when you're making vent changes. Okay? I guess that's it. You guys are all set for your test next week.
Wait, Yvonne, I have one question. For that
Okay.
scenario, why would you not say oxygenation? Because you don't know what FiO2 is. So how would you be able to tell if you do oxygen rate?
I would have to give you more information. Yeah, I just wanted to make the correlation between vent settings and light gases. Yeah, we'll get lots of practice doing it. After I give you like modes of ventilation, then we'll go into patient scenarios.
Were you guys enjoy the rest of the day?
Yes.
I wrote it down. You can stay. You're more than welcome.
I know.
You can edit that.